I always tell people the story when I'm speaking that I know I make my wife mad a lot of times. And if I do something that aggravates her, she might just blurt out, "You are such an asshole." And I always say, I would be more receptive if she first said, "Honey, can I give you some feedback?" And I would say, "Sure, what? Anything." And she would say, "Honey, you are such an asshole."
You are now listening to the podcast where authors inspire listeners to become authors, the Going North Podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer, best-selling author, and book enthusiast, Dom Brightman. And you're going to be listening to a different author that will inspire you to join the business of immortality, known as authorship. Now let the fun begin. Today's episode is sponsored by book number 2 from Dominic Dom Brightman, Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. It is the field guide to help unleash the elite performer that is inside of you. Cop it today on Amazon.com or heading over to dombrightman.com and snag it in book, ebook, and audio book, so that way you can take it on the go and get yourself on the go to your northbound success. And today on the highlight reel builder for authors known as the Going North Podcast, we got another super special, awesome human for you today, courtesy of podmatch.com, the wonderful site where podcast guests get to connect with podcast hosts. And if they're cool, they're freaking in. And today's guest is definitely cooler than 2 cucumbers. We'll give him cooler than 10 cucumbers indeed, because my man has probably one of the funniest book titles I've heard in a long while. And that's coming from a guy who's interviewed over 700 authors and worked at the library during the daytime. And the beautiful thing about it is that my man is not only a wonderful author, he's also a wonderful speaker, workshop facilitator, as well as a retired VP of the wonderful organization known as Marriott indeed. So let's give it up for the Chief PAFU Officer, the Tribal Chief of PAFU Nation. And for those who may not know what PAFU is, it stands for People Are Fucked Up, because yes, they are. Let's give it up for Roy Nassau. How you doing today, Roy?
I'm great, Dom. Thank you. I appreciate being on the show. Thank you.
Yes, dude. Yes, dude. It's honored to have you on. I'm like, when my man reached out, and then when I saw your book title, I'm like, man. This is like every customer service worker's thought at least once within the first week.
At least in the first week, maybe the first day. You never know.
That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Well, my goodness, that's your first time on the show, and introductions aren't allowed to be 45.75 years long. I probably forgot a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm filling listeners in on who is the one and only Roy Nassau.
Yeah, Dom, thank you. Well, I have had a great career with Marriott Hotels for 44 years, as you mentioned. Started working for Marriott right out of college. And 44 years later, I don't want to say I'm a victim, I'm a result of the pandemic downsizing of many organizations. But it was near my time with Marriott after 44 years, and 44 years working with thousands of employees, hundreds and hundreds of executives, presidents and owners of companies. I have had my share of human interaction, and the vast majority of it has been wonderful and terrific with lots of great people. But you can't ignore that you come across people whose behavior you just can't explain. It's a little irrational, it's a little unreasonable, maybe it's a little illogical, but that was the precursor behind PAFU and writing down my thoughts on how to deal with annoying and irritating people in the workplace. So that's my short and brief background.
There we go. Just like Fruit of the Loom, a brief background indeed. That's right. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, my goodness, so 44 years with a single company. My goodness, man. Like, how'd that even happen? Did you like go to school seeking to get into the hospitality field, or was it like just something where it was like, oh, it just fell out of heaven out of nowhere because I had no idea what else to do?
No, actually, I did join Marriott right out of college on purpose. I will tell you that I had a great childhood. My father was in radio and television, and he was a sports announcer. So I had a wonderful upbringing. And initially, I wanted to go into that business because it was so cool what he did in meeting and interviewing athletes and celebrities. But he was the one who told me, don't do it. It's very difficult. It's not worth your time. And he's the one who pushed me into the hotel business. So after 4 years at Penn State, I interviewed with three different hotel companies and I selected Marriott. Well, they selected me and I joined Marriott because at the time I joined Marriott in 1976, Dom, there were 26 hotels and they were growing very rapidly. And here they are 45, 46 years later, and they have over 8,000 hotels. So I think I made a wise choice in picking the company that had a lot of growth and a lot of growth opportunities for me.
Hey, man. So that definitely say that again. Indeed. Definitely wholeheartedly agree with you because that's some kind of explosive growth right there for 44. What was it 44 hotels all the way up to 8,000?
26 hotels that now there's 8,000. When I joined the company, they were literally opening a hotel every 2 weeks because it was just explosive growth in the 70s and 80s. So I was fortunate to be with a company whose leader, Bill Marriott, had great vision and great business acumen and understood how to grow a business the way he did. It was a lot of fun, and like I said, I met a lot of great people along the way that helped me shape my leadership skills and my relationship skills with people.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about. Indeed. So I'm talking about. Indeed. Sweet. So you got this fabulous book now. I guess that makes you a book boomer since you, I guess, sadly got sent away after the darn pandemic hit us. So my goodness, man, how's it feel? Like, how is it like putting your wisdom, like 44 years? That's like a lot of life lessons and stories together in a wonderful package book because it's only 99 pages, right?
It's a short book. Again, my own personality and style is, I like to get to the point. I don't like to draw things out. So, yeah, 44 years, but the whole idea of PAFU germinated around 19 in the mid 80s, where I was opening a hotel in Orlando, and we had some employees who were doing some things that just didn't make any sense. It was illogical. They were actually stealing money from the customers by adding
Wow.
by adding gratuity into the check before the customer even signed the check and paid the bill. And because of that, I remember telling my boss at the time, I said, you know what? There's like 14 out of 16 waiters that are stealing. And he had said, what in the hell were they doing? What were they thinking? And I said, Jim, I don't really know, but sometimes people are just fucked up. And that's how PAFU was born. So when I retired from Marriott, I decided I would try to jot down a handful of PAFU behaviors that are in the workplace that are pretty common. And then at the end of the book, I sort of address the notion of, well, how do you deal with people that are annoying or irritating or really just disruptive to the workforce? And that's the nature of the book. It's short and sweet. There may be a second book on the horizon because PAFU behavior never stops, Dom. It never stops.
You could say that again, and my goodness, that is It's kind of apropos that that was the wonderful response to that. Because my goodness, just sneaking in and adding money like that, gratuities like that, just so they can get extra money. Like, dude, that's unethical to the highest freaking degree right there. My goodness.
Yes, not only is it unethical, but when we were terminating the employees and we sort of asked them why they were doing it, they really didn't have a good reason other than I guess they were greedy. They were making plenty of money, but they saw an opportunity and again just didn't seem to make sense to us on the rationale behind it because they had great jobs and great careers and they blew it all due to their greed. So that was the beginning of PAFU, which opened our eyes to other behaviors of managers and employees that we just shook our head in disbelief and say, what in the hell are they doing? And again, we just kept identifying and noticing when people were doing things that didn't make sense, whether it was stealing or whether it was just interrupting meetings by making jokes or disrupting the person who was leading a meeting. That person in a meeting, Dom, I don't know if this happens to you, but people sit in the meeting and there's someone speaking and there's always that one person who's typing away on their computer, clicking away, distracting everybody from what's being said in the front of the room because they evidently have more important things to do than to listen to the person speaking in the meeting. And that person's PAFU because they're just doing something that is irrational and illogical and just can't make any sense of it. So you have to tell them about it.
Yes, indeed. Definitely true. We got to really nip that in the bud early. So, my goodness. And like just with that behavior alone, is there any other major ones that stick out for folks who may be back in the workforce? Like, oh man, I was doing a solo thing at home. And it's like, crap. Now we're bound around a bunch of people again.
The behavior that I despise the most is people who interrupt. And it happens at work with your coworkers. It happens with your friends. It happens at home with your better half, your partner. Obviously, people have to get out what they have on their mind, irrespective of the other person's speaking or articulating their thoughts, and they just interrupt. And it's like one of the worst habits in the world that people just in the middle of somebody speaking, they just blurt out whatever's on their mind. Sometimes it's relevant to the conversation because they want to make their point before they lose it in their head. And sometimes they just blurt out something that's completely irrelevant to the conversation because they want to share something about themselves that they can't hold back. So interrupters are the thing that I don't like the most. But there are other behaviors that hopefully people will recognize and see. One of my coworkers, or many of my coworkers, were unable to get to the point they were trying to make, and they would blather on and on and on, trying to get to the point, but they would go off on tangents, and they were just dragging on. In the book, that behavior is called land the plane, where you just want to shake somebody by the shoulders to say, okay, get to the point already. What do you want to tell me? And that's a behavior that we see commonly amongst people who just can't seem to get to the point. So just land the plane, Dom, land the plane.
Oh, you're so right about that. It's like they got to give us the whole 300-page novel story experience before they get to the problem. It's like, come on, get to the point already. It's like, it's
Yes.
entertaining sometime, but not all the freaking time. My God.
No, there's a very common phrase where somebody says, when you ask someone what time it is, you don't want to hear how the watch is made. And yeah, yeah.
That's definitely true indeed. Definitely true indeed. So my goodness, my goodness. So with all those wonderful lessons learned and with the follow-up book most likely appearing, because well, the thing is, it's like, hey, once you write one book, it's kind of hard not to write a second one. What are the three major leadership lessons you've learned from your time at Marriott with all that leadership experience under your wonderful black belt?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll give you, I don't know if they're top three, but they're the top of mine three that I think about. One is you have to treat people right. When you're leading people, it's critical that you acknowledge and make sure that you're treating people with respect and kindness and caring. That is crucial to building a team. Secondly, is you got to be candid and honest. A lot of leaders do not like to share the truth, even when it hurts. But I found that it's most beneficial if you just let people know the honest truth, even if it hurts. Most people will appreciate hearing the truth rather than hiding behind something else. And thirdly, I'd say you have to have really strong relationship building skills. And that's a broad topic, but I would start by saying that leaders need to build trust with their team, both up the ladder and down the ladder. And building trust is not easy because it requires you to engage in multiple activities where people can rely on you and you're responsible. So you have to do your job really well. People have to trust that you're going to perform and do your job. And people need to trust that you're going to have their back and support them and make sure that everybody's working together as a team. And again, I'll go back to honesty. When you're honest, that builds trust more than probably any other factor. And then people know they can rely on you. And all of a sudden, people start coming to you for guidance and support. And you know that you've been successful as a leader.
Sweet. Three solid tips indeed. That's right indeed. Folks can appreciate candor when it's all said and done. Because like, yeah, getting to that meeting with the boss, it's like, hey, you screwed up here, here, and here, buddy. It's like, ah, darn. And then it's like, man, my boss is evil. And then when you look back on, it's like, you know what? Maybe I did f that up. It's like, yeah, it's like they were just really doing a job at the end of the day for the good bosses. Yeah, there's some bad ones out there, but hey, it's like, oh, there's still some good ones out there too. That's right,
There
indeed.
are.
Especially that. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, my goodness, my goodness. So, with putting this book together, were there any setbacks along the way that you had to overcome to finally get to the other side of finally hitting that publish button?
Yeah, I had never written a book before. I can tell you that I wrote thousands of emails through my career, but writing a book was an interesting task for me to undertake. And I did have a lot of bumps along the way. First of all, just getting my thoughts on paper in a format that was understandable and wasn't just a 2 sentence email, was new to me. So I had to really work on that and write a book or write stories that people could relate to. So just writing as a book was a big hurdle and a skill set that is probably not easily. I have the utmost respect for authors. As you said, my books, 99 pages, 20,000 words. So people that write books that are 50, 60, 100,000 words, I give them all the credit and kudos that they deserve because that's not easy. So once you get your words down on paper, I have to tell you, Dom, I had no idea whether my book was flowed well. I didn't know, I'd never written a book, so how do I know if it's even readable? So I found, and I don't know if your listeners or if you've done this, I found help through freelancers that I found a person who all they did was read manuscripts. They didn't read them for structure and errors. They read them for content and flow. So I found somebody who did that for me, and their advice was invaluable. I have to tell you, after they read my first manuscript, I went back and I rewrote the entire book from scratch. That was a really good lesson for me to learn. I didn't mind learning that, but it took a lot of time to rewrite the book, reformat it, restructure it, get it in the right order that flowed well, and made sure that my writing tone was consistent throughout the book. You're obviously a more experienced author than I am, so you probably understand that, and it's a lot easier for experienced authors, but not for me. And then the final thing I did, or I needed to do, was obviously it needed to be proofread. And Dom, I thought I was pretty good at English, but really not. I sent my book to a proofreader, and she was outstanding. I probably had 1,000 errors in a 20,000 word book, and they were all spot on. They helped me make sure the book and the meaning behind what I was writing was relevant and it resonated. And with those people helping me put the final book together, I couldn't have done it without those kinds of people supporting me. So those were the big lessons I learned. And then I published independently. I talked to a business author who had written a very, very successful business book that had sold millions of copies. And he said to me, publish independently. He said, publishing houses get thousands of manuscripts a day. And so for you to get your manuscript even read may be challenging. And so I decided to publish independently, which was the reason, I shouldn't say the reason, but it was the bedrock for me to launch my career, or second career, to be a speaker and to do workshops regarding annoying and irritating behaviors that break down company cultures. So writing the book was I don't want to say it was enjoyable, because I don't know that I enjoyed it, but it was a great experience writing a book.
Sweet, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. And you're so right about like the different types of editors you need. Cause it's like, oh yeah, just get somebody to proofread it, and boom, a freaking end. It's like, no, we gotta have the content to be really good and make sense and everything flow correctly. Cause it's like, yeah, and I can resonate with the whole knowing English and well, half knowing English and then going to an editor and then getting beat down. It's like, oh god. It's like I put the billy club away already. It's like, nah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But hey, you're able to do it, make it through, and first of many books to come indeed. So my goodness, so since you've been on a couple interviews so far and there's gonna be plenty more to come, is there a question that you wish folks would ask you more often when you're being on these interviews?
The one question I think I love being asked is, again, how do you effectively deal with people who are problem employees? Because that's what most leaders struggle with, is how do you deal with people who don't fit into the culture or whose behavior is annoying other people? The one thing I find, is that most leaders find it really easy. I shouldn't say really easy. That's not right, but they find it easier to deal with an employee who is not performing their job, not doing the tasks associated with the job, but they don't know how to talk to people who have a behavior that is disruptive. Like I said, whether they're interrupters or whether they're trying to think of some of the other behaviors that we talk about, whether somebody is a chicken little, that's the person who everything's a crisis and everything's a problem, no matter how small it is, they have to make it a crisis. And people get annoyed with those individuals, and leaders tend to just ignore those problems because they chalk it up to someone's personality. So I like people to ask me and to talk about, well, how do you deal with people who are breaking down the culture or are breaking down the team's effectiveness? Because that's where leaders seem to not be trained or given guidance. You're left to figure it out on your own, hoping that you have a personality that you can do that. But so many leaders fail because they're not addressing the problem of someone's personality is not conducive to the work environment. So yeah, ask me about how you deal with people. That's my favorite question.
And good point about the chicken littles who like to make everything a crisis, because like, oh God, like, dude, we got so many other big problems in the world right now. This is like a paper clip to a whole freaking anvil here. Like, come on now.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right indeed. So any advice for, or extra advice for those dealing with the chicken littles out there who think the sky is falling, but it's just snow?
Yeah, my advice always is to sit down and talk to somebody. In my book, I have an acronym for giving feedback called Build a Bridge, where bridge is, each letter of bridge is a component of giving effective feedback. But I will tell you this, Dom, the most important aspect of talking to somebody, whether it's your boss, your coworker, or a subordinate, is the first thing and the most important thing you should always do is ask permission. Because when you ask somebody, can I give you some feedback, or I have something important to talk to you about, when would it be a good time? When you ask somebody permission, it really opens them up to being much more receptive. It opens them up to listening. They know that what you have to say is important because you've asked them permission to talk to them about something that might be bothering you. So when you ask permission, it really sets the tone for a very productive and hopefully effective dialogue, which should never be one way, because when you're giving feedback, it needs to be a two-way discussion of you never know what's happening in somebody else's life, Tom. So sometimes you need to, talk about it and listen and understand. You just can't tell somebody that they're being a jerk. You need to really dig down a little bit. But asking permission really sets the stage for a very successful and productive discussion.
Sweet, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Because folks probably need to go back to that, because there's a lot of folks out there who be like, yeah, I think too many folks may heard about the whole like ask for forgiveness afterwards and just do the darn thing anyway. I think folks have went to that class too much now, and they've used that lesson in the wrong occasions now.
Yes.
It's like, yep. So be the jerk first and ask for forgiveness. It's like, it's like,
No,
it's like ask for
no,
permission
no.
first now, folks.
Yes. I always tell people the story when I'm speaking that I know I make my wife mad a lot of times. And if I do something that aggravates her, she might just blurt out, "You are such an asshole." And I always say, I would be more receptive if she first said, "Honey, can I give you some feedback?" And I would say, "Sure, what? Anything." And she would say, "Honey, you are such an asshole." And I would say, okay, message received. Thank you. Yes, try that at home.
This podcast is not responsible for what happens afterwards. You're on your own. Will Smith and the other guy from Men in Black 1. Red lights, like, yep. It's like, are they going? Nope, 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 nope. You heard that in the Going South podcast, not the Going North. Like, get it right. Taking a dirt nap. We already know what happened. So my goodness, my goodness. So if your wonderful book, PAFU, if it were a food, what would it be and why?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't even know if I have a quick response to that. If it was a food and why, you know what? I think it would be a great glass of a lovely red wine. That's what I think it is because red wine is calming. It not only does it taste good, but it's hearty. It makes you feel better. It warms your insides, and you feel much better after you have a glass of red wine. So PAFU might be like a great glass of red wine.
Especially when you read the book too. It'll be well read.
Yes, you got it.
That's right indeed. That's right indeed. A glass of red wine next to a wonderful book, Pafu. When you read the book and you finish, you'll be like, yep, that person's well read now. They might even be so red they're tomato red. Oh man. Before any more puns appear, even though they're going to still appear regardless, we're coming down to the question that every guest gets to receive. And that is, if you're to wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again, but you're still in the current year, what advice would you give to yourself?
Yeah, that is always a good discussion starter, and I would probably tell myself to be a little bit more observant, listen, and ask a lot more questions. Clarify, understand, question why people do things, just really dig into how people behave. And more importantly, I would want to focus on the people that are really successful because I want to know why they're successful and what made them achieve the greatness that they achieved. They always ask these questions at dinner parties, Dom, of if you could have dinner with any three people, dead or alive, who would you have dinner with? I don't know who I would have dinner with, but I know the answer usually is because you want to learn from that individual and you want to really understand their thought process, no matter who they are. You usually want to understand how they went about achieving what they achieved. So I would tell my 25-year-old self, seek out those people that are really successful and ask them lots of questions to understand what made them successful, um, depending on your definition of success, I guess. But that's what I would tell my 25-year-old self. Find out more, ask more, learn more.
Woo! Hooray for more indeed. Asking more and learning more indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That motto, that observation, that's right indeed, can save lives. That's right
Yeah.
indeed. That's right indeed. It'll may even help you to avoid PAFU a lot faster.
That would be the goal, wouldn't it?
It's like, oh shoot, the red flags are there, the signs are there. It's the sign I've been looking for. All right. Left turn to right turn. I found my fork in the road for this person. I make a run for it. It's like,
Yeah.
yep, that's right
Yeah.
indeed. That's right indeed. So my goodness, so for those who need to keep in contact with the tribal chief of PAFU Nation himself, the Radiant Roy himself, and all the stuff that you're doing, what's the best way for folks to do so?
Well, the best way to connect with me is through my website, roynassau.com. And people can message me that way. I am also on LinkedIn, so people can DM me on LinkedIn. Not a problem with that either. And I'd love to connect with anybody who wants to not only talk about PAFU, but talk about anything in general. I'm a sponge for information. I love feedback myself. So if someone reads the book and wants to provide me some feedback, I love to get feedback. It's the only way I can get better. But those are the two best ways to connect with me, through the website and through LinkedIn.
Sweet. Well, there you have it, folks. Reach out to the man himself. That's right indeed. That's right indeed, for some good stuff indeed. And copies of his magical book, and share with your friends, family, cat, dog, penguin. Share with your boss. Share with your supervisees, even though that's not a word, but it is a word now. That's right indeed. Share with your peeps. That's right indeed. Heck, even buy a box of peeps out of season or in season and share with those peeps too. That's right indeed. Make them some PAFU ducks. That's right indeed. So folks can know these peeps are really amped up indeed, because they have not been acquainted with the PAFU Nation, but they can also join indeed. So my goodness, any parting words before we close up shop, Roy?
Dom, thank you very much for having me on your show. It was indeed a pleasure. And I would only suggest to people that if they see PAFU behavior, they need to kill it like a snake. You got to address it. You got to deal with it. You can't ignore it. So once you see PAFU, you'll see it a lot more, and you need to figure out how to address it. Read my book. That'll be one way to address it. And hopefully that'll get you on the right path to not having to deal with people who annoy you anymore.
If you're hearing this part of the episode, that means you're one cool individual. Thanks a bunch for tuning in, and if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to share it with at least one other person in your network. Bonus points for 3. And be sure to check out the backlog too while you're at it, because there are hundreds of wonderful episodes to choose from as well.